Good evening. We are going to go ahead and start off with a video. I hope it's loud enough, and then we will go straight into the class.
We have lost far too many lives traveling the path to this day.
Since 1937, over 2,000 people have died at the Golden Gate Bridge. I feel lucky to be alive every single day.
Of the thousands that have died off the Golden Gate Bridge, I am of the 1% who have survived. So I was born on drugs and premature. And then I bounced around from home to home. And nobody wanted to keep me because I was sick. And I got lucky. I landed in the home of Patrick and Deborah Hines. I had a great childhood. I thought, growing up, that everything's going to be great. And then at 17, it all came crashing down. If you can imagine feeling that everyone around you is out to get you, trying to hurt you, and trying to kill you. And you believe that to be the truth. From the extreme paranoia, I exhibited symptoms of mania. From the mania came the hallucinations, both auditory and visual. And so with that, the bipolar disorder, I just was spiraling out of control. I vividly remember writing my suicide note. People don't get it, but I thought I was a burden to everyone who loved me. Because that's what my brain told me, because that's how powerful your brain is. I got off the bus. I walked slowly down the walkway of the Golden Gate Bridge. People rode by me, drove by me, walked by me, and a woman approached me, and she said, "Do you pick?" I picked it. She said thanks, and she walked away. There's that moment I just said, nobody cares. The reality was that everybody cares. Just couldn't see it. I ran forward, and using my two hands, I catapulted myself into free fall. What I'm about to say is the exact same thing that 19 Golden Gate Bridge jump survivors have also said. The millisecond my hands left the rail, it was an instant regret. And I remember thinking, no one's going to know that I didn't want to die. In 4 seconds I fell 75 miles an hour, 25 stories, and I hit the water. I was in the most physical pain I've ever experienced. I have ever experienced. The Coast Guard was amazing. He was just so freaked out that I was alive that he just dove in and brought me on board. The guy said, "Do you know any people with blood squatting on the island yet?" And I said, "No, I don't want to know." The guy put his hand on my forehead and said, "Kid, you're a miracle." My father took one step in the hospital room, and I looked up at him and I said, "Dad, I'm sorry." And he said, "No, Ken, I'm sorry." And if you think about it, both of our immediate reactions were guilt. Guilt that didn't belong to either of us. And even though I didn't die, I caused people a great deal of grief and pain. Just the day of my attempt still sits within them today. I asked my father if he still feared my death by suicide. He said every time the phone goes off, his first inclination is Kevin alive. I had an impact on my dad. So after the jump, the road to recovery was pretty long. I had 7 psych ward stays in the next 11 years. I still have all the symptoms I ever had. Mania, depression, psychosis, hallucinations, all that's still there. I just know how to cope with it and I know how to beat it. I built a support network over these years of treatment so that I wouldn't be fighting this alone. So like, it's okay not to be okay. It's not okay not to ask for someone to back you up. To the families who live with the loss or losses of loved ones, they didn't do that to hurt you or destroy your life. They took their lives because they were struggling in a great deal of emotional and mental pain. Suicide, mental illness, and addiction are the only diseases that we blame the person for perpetually. But people die from suicide just like they die from any other organ disease. Today, no matter the pain I'm in, no matter the struggles I experience, I do believe that life is the greatest gift we've ever been given. And if you're suffering mentally, don't wait like I did sitting in denial for so long. Because recovery happens. Living proof.
there's some statistics as to how this affects our nation. In 2017, there were 47,173 reported suicide deaths. Currently, suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. Every day, approximately 129 Americans take their own lives. Suicide was the second leading cause of death for adults between the ages of 10 and 34 years in the United States. This is just some statistics that are out there and they're real. The primary reason why someone dies of suicide is the primary reason. The depression is the primary reason why someone dies of suicide about every 13 minutes, over 41,000 people a year. How would you help someone with suicidal thoughts? How would you help someone, and you can feel free to answer that question as best as you can. And how would you help someone with suicidal thoughts who just want to end their life as we know it? Yep. Okay. Let them know that someone cares. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Good. All right. Wow. One thing that the man on that video, Kevin Hines, didn't mention is that as he was going down, and I mean, they did say it was a miracle. I like to think, yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't be, but as he's going down on this free fall, he himself is praying to God, saying, God, I don't want to die. And he instantly regretted the decision he made, and he somehow survived. But he did pray during those moments. There's a few things that if you might not know, you could do. And one of the reasons that I'm bringing this up, it was talking about, part of the class is going to be about depression and how depression is present, but how God helps in our depressive state and other people's depressive state. But I had to help someone who wanted to end their lives. I was on the phone with this person, and she was determined to end her life, and she would leave behind a 4-year-old daughter, and she was present in the room with her. I wasn't really ready for that. I just, she was talking to my mother, and all of a sudden my mom's like, you gotta help this person. Like, nah, I'm like, what just happened? So I grabbed the phone, and I'm talking to this lady, and the one thing that I know that I think I did right, and she ended up not doing what she did, in that moment was just being a listening ear, was just listening to what she has to say, see how she felt, why she felt the way she did, why did she feel like she had to go to that extreme. You know, I didn't say, why did you have to feel that? I just heard her say what she had to say, and also make conversation with the person. I didn't necessarily patronize them like, oh, but you are like the greatest thing on earth. Not necessarily, because people can read through that, go through that. At least that's what I've seen. But long story short, she didn't commit that act. However, 3 years later, she did carry it through, unfortunately. And she left behind a 7 or 8 year old daughter who's my niece. So it's definitely something that's present in our world. I mean, you hear it, if not weekly, daily on the news in some sort of way, depending on your job, where you work, what you do. You might hear more often. But the reality is that people do carry out with this act for whatever reason. It could be mental, but the one I want to deal with personally tonight is when a depressive state from someone goes to the point that they don't want to live anymore and they just want to end their lives. Something that you could do, you can encourage a person to call a suicide hotline number. That's 800-273-TALK, 800-273-8255. Do we have Facebook Live going, Alexis? Okay, good. Just making sure. So if anyone's listening out there as well, and if you are feeling the way that you want to take your life, 800-273-8255, definitely call and get some help there from a trained counselor for sure. Another thing you could do for somebody that maybe they're not on the verge that you have to call 911 because they're ready to do what they're trying to do, take their lives, but maybe they having thoughts. Maybe you see some symptoms like, well, wait a minute, they're saying that I'm mad at life, I want to end it. Okay, and then you see something else along with those lines. Maybe they're distancing way too much from their family. They're not acting the same. Like all these kind of symptoms that might give you an indicator that I might want to keep an eye on this person. Obviously not question them and play 20 questions with them, but if you do see and they have said things like, oh, are you, something like, oh, I want to end my life, something you could do, and I'm using this as a reference from another person. He was from the Coast Guard, and he actually was, his name was Kevin Gibbs, I want to say, but I probably got his name wrong. But he was the Coast Guard that was in charge of the area where the Golden Bridge was, and he would deal with people that would do this kind of act too many times to count. And one of the things that he did say was listen to the person, and not only that, but just be there for them, and not don't overload them with anything. They already have a burden, and you need to take them off that burden. So you want to encourage someone to get treatment. And one thing he did say now that came back to my mind is that sometimes if that person, you see that they're kind of having those thoughts, you want to confront them head on. In what sense? If you see that they're having those thoughts, you're like, someone in your position would end up taking their lives. Are you feeling that way? And then that way you're not putting all that pressure on them. You're saying, you're already relating the fact that this could happen to a lot of people in the world. It's not just to them, with whoever person you might be dealing with that has that issue. And then that way maybe they can reveal that to you. They can say, you know what, I have been thinking about taking my life, and I don't want to continue to live on. That's one way to get somebody to reveal that, and then you can work with that. You can encourage them to seek treatment. I mean, whether it be medical treatment, maybe it doesn't even have to get medical necessarily. It could just be, you might be that treatment. Maybe God can help you in that way to be that treatment for that person. Be there for them, pray for them. Just be someone to listen to them. Offer to help the person take steps to get assistance and support again. They need somebody to support them because at that state they don't really think that nobody cares for them, as he was saying in that video. There's times where they get to a state that it's just nobody really cares for me, nobody really cares, or I'm a burden to people. So people that are in that state, they need to know that you're not a burden and that I'm here to listen to you and I'm here to help you. How can I help you? One thing that I encourage that if we ever meet someone with that kind of thoughts or had those thoughts, to not be patronizing or judgmental. Don't say, well, wait a minute, think about all that you're leaving behind. I mean, what do you're gonna go to hell. You're not really gonna help the situation in that sense, at least to me. I don't think that's gonna, I mean, we can't say ultimately that, yeah, and that's true. I mean, but at the same time, one thing, I'm not judged, I don't know, but I do think that what we should encourage is to help them. We should be respectful and acknowledge that person's feelings. Encourage the person to avoid any kind of, if they're into alcohol or anything like that, to avoid those kind of things. Never promise to keep someone's suicidal feelings a secret. That's more for like teenagers kind of thing, like whatever that may be. Like, oh, don't say that I want to do this. If somebody wants to take their life, I'm not keeping it as a secret. I'm seeking help for them one way or another. And that's just some things that you could do if you ever meet that situation that you have to do with somebody like that and you have to help them. Definitely, first and foremost, just be a listening ear. Instead of talking so much, listening more. And then not just say, just really, really listen to these people or whoever you present yourself that may have those thoughts. Now, say that you can reach this person with a godly message. Let's just say that they don't dismiss God, right? They don't go ahead and have like a reaction of, well, I don't believe in God, all that stuff. Like, let's just say that they can engage you in that way, and they don't dismiss the idea of God. Then this part that I'm going to talk about will be beneficial to bringing God into this person's picture. I personally think that a deep root cause, as far as someone makes a decision to take their life, starts with depression. One of the stats that I gave today is because depression is one of the leading causes that leads to suicide. From a biblical standpoint, now that we can establish, let's just say you establish that point with this person and you're talking to them, they're willing to listen. From a biblical standpoint, do you know anyone who has dealt with depression? In other words, in the Bible, that you know someone that you can say, you know, this person went through it, this person suffered depression. Do you know anybody biblically that went through depression? Elijah? Okay. Do you know exactly why Elijah went through depression? He did, definitely, but do we know a little bit of the story, like why? Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Alrighty, thank you. That was a great summary. Basically, after seeing what happened with the prophets of Baal, he feared for his life. He feared for his life, and in 1 Kings 19:4, he said, "I've had enough, Lord." He said, "Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." Now, of course, I don't think he was saying like, "Oh, suicide." That's not the definition of suicide. But I'm saying that he just was so depressed that he didn't want to just keep with this life. He wanted God to just take him, similar to how he took Enoch. But he was very depressed. The next person I'm thinking about is, yeah, go ahead.
I guess you could say Judas.
Judas? Okay.
After he betrayed Jesus and gave him up, and then he went and hung himself.
Yep. Well, definitely. Yeah. He went through that depression, and he did commit that decision. Unfortunately, I think I'm not speaking for God here, but then again through His Word, if Judas would have come in a very humble way, you can go into the Judas and Peter kind of thing, because they did do something wrong, but one of them really repented the right way. The other one shows a different path, and I think Judas would have definitely been forgiven. I would like to think, if he really did, but just definitely he went through depression, and that depression led him to commit that act. Anyone else that we can think of? Yes. Apostle. Oh, thank you.
In 2 Corinthians 1 and verse 8, it says, "For we do not want you to be ignorant, brethren, of our trouble which came to us in Asia, that we were burdened beyond measure, above strength, so that we despaired even of life." So the struggles of the early church caused them to, it says, experience trouble, burden beyond measure, above strength, so that we despaired even of life. So I don't think they were contemplating suicide.
Right. But
Just
they were depressed.
The pressure was discouraging to them with the struggle that they were going through.
Yeah. The word that they were, I believe, was it desperate? Is that the word that's said there?
Despaired.
Despaired. Depending on what translation, I believe on the Greek, if I'm not mistaken, if you translate it, it's like depressed or depression. So they were depressed in that sense of everything that was going on during that time. Paul and the apostles at that time, in 1 Corinthians 1, chapter 1, verse 8, 9, definitely, for sure, that's another example. Thinking of a very, 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 very obvious example, and I'm pretty sure you all know it, and you can mention it if you want, before I get into it. Yes, David is one of them. Yes, that's not the one I'm looking for, but David, yeah, definitely David. I wish I had the time tonight to read Psalms 42 and 43, where really it's kind of, if you want to go ahead and read those at home, maybe you've read them already, you know them by heart, but they're really good because it kind of shows our humanity through David. It shows our humanity in our depressive state, and yet at the same time it shows a David that, yeah, I'm going through depression, but at the same time he's struggling with that depression, but he's bringing himself to God at the same time. Why are you cast down, O my soul? Trust in the Lord. So he's just revealing, like, this is my nature, but even though I'm depressed, I am still hoping on the Lord. So very, 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 very good Psalms there. So Psalm 42 and 43 definitely. And yes, David for sure. Thank you for bringing that. So just two more examples, and then we'll continue on. But I'm just thinking of one specifically. Jesus, yeah, not that one, but that one's a good one too. Jesus, for sure. When he was at Gethsemane and he prayed, I like to think he was depressed, because did he not say that my soul is weary to a point of death. I like to think he was. So Jesus himself was, to a certain point, depressed for sure. They were going to take his life. They were going to, he was going to suffer something that he didn't deserve in the first place. And so definitely Jesus is a good example for sure. I'm just going to give a few more examples. Job. Job suffered depression for sure. And depression in a lot of ways, because he lost everything that he owned, as we all know, and at the same time, he was stricken in the flesh with something that you could call, it's very close to maybe leprosy, or open wounds that he had, and he had to scratch them, and it was just a miserable state for human life to be in, and he was. And not only that, but depending on your take on his wife, the comment that she made of, you're holding your integrity, curse God and die, whether she did it because, I just don't want to see you suffering anymore, or whether she did it out of malice, I don't know. But what I do know is that I'm sure that didn't help Job yet. Job's response was, like basically, are we not to take the good and bad from God? Are we not to take the things that come along in life? And some of the things that he said, why did I not perish at birth and die as I came from the womb? Job 3:11. I have no peace, no quietness, I have no rest, but only turmoil. I loathe my very life, therefore I will give free rein to my complaint and speak out in the bitterness of my soul. That's Job 10:1. Before that it was Job 3:26. So Job was another person that suffered greatly. Now, let's just say that maybe the fact you might not know someone that it's in that state to, suicide, if you will. I like to think of that as a most extreme aspect of depression, going off the rails, if you will. Maybe with other things mixed into it, but depression being one of the big things in it. Say that you don't know anybody like that, but maybe you know somebody that's to your left and right that might have been depressed or is depressed right now, or may be in a deep depression. Maybe a fellow Christian, a fellow brother or sister. Not to the point, like I said, of taking their lives, but maybe they're still depressed. What would you tell them? How would you deal with them? Yes.
There's a lot of very complex. Obviously, you have to take care of any immediate problems or
Right.
what may have led to things, but a lot of things, it might be a chemical imbalance, it might be guilt. I kind of think that's like Judas. His depression was guilt related.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not a trained professional, but it's really complex.
For sure.
And so, trying to deal with whatever you can deal with, if it's guilt and asking for forgiveness and things like that. But depression is something that's pretty deep. I don't think it just goes away, with, a 10-minute talk.
No, for sure.
It may take counseling. Elijah, the first thing God did for him, and I'm not saying this fits everybody. It's a complex thing, but he rested. I think he was exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
And then he ate, and then he rested again, and then he ate. And there was an angel there, feeding it or preparing food for him. And then he gave him a job to do. Here, I got something for you to do. You need to anoint these people. And so, having a purpose or having a sort of a mission, I think that's important. But, it might be you need to see a doctor.
Yep.
If it's a chemical imbalance, I mean, the Bible will direct you to a doctor, I guess. And there's things outside the Bible that need taking care of as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a real complicated thing, and trying to get somebody the help they need and working with them and things like that, I think is all part of it, so a very complicated issue.
For sure. Definitely very complicated. Not know. I know of a coworker. She was talking to another coworker, and he would take meds to help him because he was in a very unstable mental state. And she told him, "Well, you just have to pray about it and get off the meds, and just pray about it, and you keep praying about it, and you'll be okay." So he did that, and guess what? He got worse. So it's like you said, John, like it's more complicated than it seems for sure. This class tonight, it's like barely like tipping the surface. I just wanted to bring more of an awareness kind of thing than anything, because it is something that's present in our lives. And I was just bringing some points to that. But yeah, for sure, definitely a very complex subject that we could talk on for days. And even if we're not medical professionals, for sure, we could still have so much to talk about. But some verses that I think, personally, if you've been through depression yourself, and one of the things that could help you if you're trying to cling into God and you're trying to search for God in that sense, the first thing that I would keep in mind is God will never leave you. Deuteronomy 31:8, he's talking to the Israelites, but I like to think we're the new Israel. It is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. Another thing we can think about is God will strengthen you and uphold you. I'm just going to give the verses out. Isaiah 41:10, fear not, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand. God hears your cry. Psalm 40:1-3. And the Lord is your shield. God is near you when you're brokenhearted. The Lord hears your cry. Come, all who labor and are heavy laden. And that's obviously a famous verse from Jesus, Matthew 11:28-30. And ultimately, we can surely hope in God. I wanted to read this quote. Weakness with acknowledgement of it is a fittest seat and subject for God to perfect to strengthen. For consciousness of our infirmities drives us out of ourselves to Him in whom our strength lies. That's Richard Seabees that brings that quote. So ultimately, long story short, we need to be aware that there's a lot of people out there that might have those thoughts, for one, and we need to pray to God to help us help them, bring them the proper help. Not necessarily be like, okay, you need to go to church, that's why you're like that. Maybe not. Not that we don't want them to go to church, or maybe they need something before that, or it's obviously a complement to that, not necessarily, okay, let's feed them the Bible. It's not always that simple, and it's not always, like John mentioned, and I agree, it's a little more complex. Yes?
In Christ, kind of found this in Psalms 147, verse 3.
Mm-hmm.
Goes along there with one of the scriptures that you mentioned about brokenhearted. And it says, He heals the brokenhearted, and He binds up their wounds. So, He definitely can help, especially when it's a Christian or something like that. But still, taking a hard line on it, I don't think is the answer. Helping them by being a listener, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's amazing what someone that is a listener. That's why God gave it 2 ears and 1 mouth. Keep the mouth shut and let the ears do the
Yeah, that's very
listening.
interesting, huh? Definitely, for sure. Yes.
I just think it's so important that Christ gives us value in understanding that too. And if you're not a Christian, you don't have that hope, you don't have that future, but God gives us value and tells us that we're loved. And I had a teacher in college that committed suicide while I was taking his class.
Wow.
And he kind of dropped some hints. I didn't really catch on to it. I mean, I was studying and doing, just wasn't focused on the words, but he would say, make sure you say goodbye to people because you'll never know if you'll see them again, sort of thing. So just, you kind of can pick up on some things when people are saying them, but
Yeah.
it's our job to love people the
Yep.
best that we can every time
Yep.
we see them. So I try to make sure I say goodbye to people.
Yeah, no.
you know.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, Alexis.
Coming from someone who attempted suicide when I was 17 and still struggle with depression to this day, I think it's important to mention that someone who, I don't need that, someone who wants to commit suicide doesn't actually want to die. They just want the suffering to end.
Yep.
So, if there's any way that you can help that person, take some of their burdens on, or any way that you can help them to relieve their stress or whatever is causing them to be depressed, it's so helpful. And listening is one of the biggest things that, is helpful to people too who are depressed. So, and praying for them and telling them that you're praying for them, like saying, oh, I prayed for you this week, or oh, I prayed for you today, I'm thinking of you. Don't just say, oh, I'm going to pray for you for that, and then
Right.
never follow up.
Yep.
So those are just a couple things I think are helpful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. Definitely. Be very, very good listeners. And the reason I brought it up tonight too is because I like to think that the Bible is designed not. How do I say this? Like, I don't want for us to just think of the Bible as, and I don't think we think of it that way, but some people, let's just say that it's a healing tool, if you will. It's something that we can use for healing for sure, not necessarily to rebuke all the time. And that rebuke, yeah, there's healing too, but I like to believe that ultimately we are to use the word in a way that heals, in a way that has a productive, loving way. And for sure, so we're now a little bit of time here and going over a little bit, and thank you for being so patient. So we're going to end with a prayer unless there's a final thought. I don't want to leave anybody behind, but yes, Jim.
Headache or things like that. We comprehend physical illness,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also mental illness that people deal with, and we look at that as strange, that somebody has a mental illness. But
Right.
the reality is that we all deal with certain types of that,
Right.
and we get depressed. We ebb and flow in life, so it's a reality that we need to be aware of.
Okay. Definitely. Thank you, Jim, for bringing that. Alrighty, so we'll go ahead and end with a prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you for tonight, and Lord, I do hope that the message tonight, Lord, just helped us all, myself personally, Lord, to just be aware of those that are around us, and just be aware that this happens nowadays, Lord, and help us to pray, not only for physical illness necessarily, but also for those that are just sick spiritually or mentally, or they just need somebody that listens to them. Lord, I just pray that you help us if we're ever present ourselves with that situation that someone that might want to do that. Lord, just give us the wisdom that we need, Father, and just help us to help them to get other proper needs, Lord. that they might need, Lord. But just help us to take the first step and bring them in prayer to you. And help us to be listeners, help us to be loving, just help us to be like Jesus, Lord. In the name of your Son I pray, amen.